Yes.
See, I'm on. Huh?
Yep, and it's 2 o'clock.
He used to be a mayor, you know, Pam.
Everyone's.
No,
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, October 24th, 2023 work session. I am setting in for the chair's position. Jerry Willie, County Commissioner. Chair and Roy Rogers are both on vacation. So I have with me Commissioner Nathan Spy and Commissioner just freshly back from vacation, Pam Treese. You must be doing something wrong.
I know.
So today we're going to start with board and leadership communication. So go ahead, Pam.
I can go first here. Good afternoon. It's nice to be back. I don't have a lot to report from last week, and my report might make some uncomfortable and jealous. So it was 82 and sunny.
Oh,
Okay, so today both Commissioner Willie and I went on a cat tour with several of our legislators. Rep. Bowman was there, and Senator Campos and Rep. Neuron, and then there were also staff members from I believe it was Bowman's office and Solman's office and several others. Oh, yes, and Hi-Fam's office. We had, I think it was a good tour, and it was a good opportunity to really have that connection point with our legislators. It's so important to make sure that they understand what it is that we're doing and can see the reality of how they're spending some of their money too. It was a nice opportunity to say thank you and to talk about the fact that we're partners in this moving forward. Zucker, I believe, has put these together and really has done a great job. It was very nice, and the staff did a fabulous job as well. So kudos to everyone. I had a conversation this morning with Catherine Malou and Kim from Metro regarding tomorrow's MPAC meeting, and it was really about the adoption of the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. There's a lot of things floating around, as always, as you come to a point where you're going to be voting on things, and some of the angst is around the tolling question and the relationship between ODOT and the region when it comes to who gets the say and what happens. So it'll be an interesting meeting tomorrow night. But I do believe that all in all, there's been a lot of great work done on the RTP. We've had a very good representation. In fact, the people that I was talking with, they were just extremely complimentary of our staff, and in particular of Jessica Peltz for the work that she's done there. And it's always great to hear those types of comments. So congratulations to you. This week I have coffee with Mary Manceau tomorrow. I have a one-on-one with Aaron about the public safety and justice paper. MPAC tomorrow night. The under consideration is the adoption of the regional transportation plan and the adoption of the high capacity transit strategy. And the last thing we're going to be doing is a discussion of the urban growth management situation and kind of the overview of our approach to estimating what the UGB growth is going to be, what the capacity is. I have an AOC budget and finance committee meeting. I've got my regular check-in with Al Roque. So I'm always look forward to understanding what's going on in the sheriff's department from Al. They're great conversations. And then finally, I have an interview scheduled with Michelle Rios. This is part of Tanya's evaluation process, and I'm sure you're all going to be doing that as well. And I want to say thank you in advance for your participation in that process. And that's my report.
Great. Thank you. Nafisa.
thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon. I want to start off by saying, Tanya and Brad, you introduced a lot of staff last week and I missed it. I was online, and it's always a bit of a weird management skill for me to come off and mute myself and say comments. But I wanted to extend my welcome to all of you and congratulations. And I'm look forward to working with all of you, and you all have an amazing, impressive background. So, yay to Washington County, and thank you for choosing this county and working with us, and look forward to collaborating. Three, right? Three amazing people. I counted four. I missed one. Who did I miss?
I was gonna say, yeah,
Seven.
we asked them all to stand up if it had been 6 months or less. And
Yeah, I missed that one. I wish the camera would turn around because I think, but I did get the comment you made that a lot of people stood up or so. But I'm very excited and sorry I didn't come off mute to congratulate you all, but I hope you can feel my excitement to work with you, and I'll definitely request a briefing with all of you so that we can get to know each other, and so you know what I'm working on and how we can collaborate moving forward. In terms of my board updates, I hope you enjoy that cat tour. We did.
Yeah.
Great turnout, and it's always good to let legislators know what we're working on. And speaking of the cat, last night, Governor Kotek convened Washington County community leaders here in the county, and actually it was a Washington County day. I only was able to participate the evening part of it, but spend the whole day in Hillsborough, in Intel, and even further out of Washington, further than Hillsborough, to really learn more about Washington County and all the good success stories, some of the challenges we're having. It was actually really good to hear what she learned on her tour during the morning. And then in the evening, what we focused was the cat, as well as many other topics like transportation. So Stephen Roberts, you'd be happy to know, and Aaron Waddell, that we talked a lot about operations and maintenance deficit when it comes to the transportation system and how that could be addressed. And you'd be surprised to know that tolling was not the biggest conversation at that table, but just recognized and moved on. But we're really focused on how the transportation system is struggling when it comes to operations and maintenance funding piece. So, and she's aware of that, and said, look into the package. And I said, we're part of that conversation as well with the League of Cities. So she was happy to hear that. So behavioral health, we're doing great work. And I did let Governor know that we need more resources, Tanya. So that was the ask, obviously. And then last week we had JPAC, and surprise, surprise, the biggest thing, Jessica, is RTP, and you're doing great work, and you put in a lot of the work behind the scenes with, the TAC and conversations with the staff. There's a lot of conversations you're having to really improve and to have Washington County voices and needs and investments centered. So we are very well represented in those discussions rather than just having a commissioner voice. Jessica's really working hard and the staff. So RTP was the biggest thing, and obviously it's going to come to a vote November next month. So we look forward to what that looks like, and there's no red flags so far. It should be a smooth sailing, I hope. And then I want to talk about two briefings I had. I had an amazing briefing about behavioral health last week, and I really learned about Washington County's behavioral health system and what are the challenges, what are future challenges, what are past challenges, and what are some of the successes that we're doing here and what we could do differently. And I look forward to continuing that. So I want to just to say to Nick and Mira, thank you so much for that briefing. And then today I had a completely different topic, something you could relate to as a CPO, Mr. Willie. Taxes.
CPA.
CPO.
I could be a CPO too, but
What's going on? CPO. CPA. You're not a community-based organization. You don't belong to my CPO stick. You're not part of that. What's going on?
Don't
It's
swell.
just a vowel, don't
Yeah.
worry.
But if you don't attend any CPO meetings,
No,
perhaps.
we're not going there.
This is a
Stay focused. Okay.
One of the briefings that I got, and I'm very grateful, Joe, to his team this morning was I think we've got this book and I requested a sort of like some content or context behind what these numbers, and I learned a lot. And it was an amazing presentation and an amazing educational an hour. And I wonder if that could be presented to us as a board because I learned a lot. I don't know if anybody requested this presentation, but
On assessment and
I-
taxation.
yes.
Ooh, riveting.
Yeah. So I tell you, but
I'm
you know,
sorry, Joe.
Joe presented and his team in a way that's digestible, but more importantly, relatable.
Right.
Relatable. These what we see here is full of numbers, but there's a reason and behind, and somebody's paying these numbers, and that somebody is you and I. So, why and how was addressed today. So I just want to say thank you. I feel like I could do a presentation, so I'd be happy to do one for our board. And and then last week I did my district town hall, the monthly district town halls that I do, and it was always a really good discussions. And then right after we did the monthly coffee that fell right next to each other. And we had a lot of just garden home folks that attended that, and a lot of other just different constituents, and it was really good. And thank you to everyone that came out to both the town hall and the coffee. But with that, I think that concludes and my time is up, so I just noticed
I
it.
didn't ring the bell on you, but that's
Oh, thank
okay.
you. Sorry, I should be paying
I
attention.
wanted you to
there.
go further into assessment and taxation, but you wouldn't do that.
I could.
Oh, I wish Joe was here. He does a great job. His staff does a great job. I've reached out to him a couple of times and had some constituent questions, and they're always very responsive. So I'm
Very.
just giving him a bad time. From my standpoint, yes, Commissioner Teresa and I went on the cat tour today. It was very good. She elaborated it just fine. It's good to talk to those folks. It's good to show them where their money's going when they gave us some money in this last session. It's also good to let them know that going forward, we're going to need partners with them as well. And that means financial partners. And so, yeah, they had lots of questions about that. And it's really going to be a phenomenal 2 facilities. We're very blessed to have that as a county because we're basically the only one in the Tri-County region that will have that in 25 and 26. So good thing. Had coffee with Kim Shuey, who is the executive director of Community Action. I am on the finance committee of Community Action, so it kind of had a dual purpose, but to get caught up a little bit about what Community Action is doing, and especially since they oversee our rental program and keeping people from getting evicted and also trying to get people back into housing. So that was good to catch up with him. And then probably the biggest thing that I continue to have for the next several weeks is going to be the Trustland County's small group discussions with the governor's office. And just remember that the Habitat Conservation Plan that's drafted right now, the modeling shows that there'll be about a 30% reduction in harvest. And for counties like Tillamook and Clatsop, that's going to be tremendously hard on their budgets because they rely on that. They actually have 2 school districts that are not in the school fund at the state. They rely 100% on timber dollars, and it will be really difficult for them to maintain that level of service. And there's a lot of other things to it. So I have one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that we communicate. So I've been trying to make sure that I forward on documents as we have them allowed for public access because our meetings are not public meetings. So because we wanted to stay pretty focused on what it is that we're doing. So, and we're working through that. Greg, I want to say, if you're listening, I want to say thank you for quickly putting together that timber information. I had requested a 10-year snapshot of our timber revenues and what special districts get and how much they get over that 10-year period, because that's what the governor is trying to focus on. This week I have ROMAC, and once again, on my every Friday meeting with the Trustland counties for timber. So that's all I have for right now. Tanya.
Afternoon, commissioners. So we have a special election underway. Ballots for the November 7th, 2023 special election were mailed last week to voters in 5 different local districts, including City of Cornelius, Fire Protection District, Gaston Fire Protection District, Scappoose School District, West Lynn Wilsonville School District. These are the only districts with measures on the ballot for this West Lynn Wilsonville School District. Yep. These are the only districts with measures on the ballot for this fall's special election. The process is going smoothly, although 66 ballots were mistakenly sent to voters within the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue District. No ballot should have been sent to these voters within TVFNR's district because they don't have a measure on this election. The error was caused by certain address ranges in the elections database being coded to the incorrect precinct split. And this goes actually back to the redistricting effort. Staff have sent a letter explaining the error to the 66 voters this week, and any ballot that elections might receive from these 66 voters will not be counted as part of this special election. So I really appreciate the communication from staff and the quick response to correcting this.
That's 66 voters, not 66 households.
Correct.
I don't have any idea how elections does this anyway. There are so myriad of options. How they do it's mind-boggling to me. So 66, I'd say that's pretty good.
Yeah, and we continue the practice anytime that there may be an error. We make sure that that error is rectified with quick communication, also letting your board know and the public know what that error is. Part of this is ensuring that we do have trust in our important and confidence in our important election process. And I just want to give kudos to our election team, which is housed within our assessment and taxation department, because they are very talented and they certainly lead with integrity and ethical standards.
Yes, they do.
The county has just launched video series, and your board has received an email with this information, which announces the end of our encampment management program. It's a 3-part series, which highlights achievements of the encampment management program and the impact that new expanded shelter and permanent supportive housing capacity is having throughout Washington County. As you might recall, the encampment management program was a temporary emergency program. It was a pilot that was born in the midst of the pandemic to address health and safety impacts of those experiencing houselessness countywide. The EMP is truly a One Washington County partnership, which includes housing, health and human services, solid waste and recycling facilities, and the sheriff's office. Funding for the EMP came through the Federal American Rescue Plan. With our expanded shelter capacity and supportive housing now available, and thanks to the regional supportive housing services dollars, we've been able to seamlessly transition or ramp down the encampment management program. Please look for an email coming from Philip with links to each of the videos, and feel free to check this out also on Washington County's social media page.
Okay.
And that concludes my update.
Great. Thank you, Don. Brad?
Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm going to focus primarily on stuff that's going to happen. So you just put it, so you're aware of what's going on. You may remember the Polanski case that had to do with the election related to flavored tobacco ban. That is going to be before the Court of Appeals in the middle of next month. And our team is working on oral argument for that case right now. The bond defeasance that we've been talking about periodically, that's going to come before your board at your next board meeting on the 7th, November 7th. So a lot of work happening in the background right now, extremely complicated to make sure it's all compliant with state and federal law. But that's being packaged right now. Also on the 7th, we're gonna have a brief presentation by Greg Sunshine with the CDC to talk about public health laws and disaster preparedness and stuff like that. We hope he will be here in person, but given the fragility of everything that's going on in Washington, DC, he doesn't know if he's gonna be able to make it or not. And we will also introduce our fellow that we have right now, Raja Honda. He's going to be in at that time, and so we'll give an introduction to y'all on him. And he's going to meet with Commissioner Fye while he's here. He's a just graduated from law school, is waiting for his bar results because in California it takes many months for them to figure out who passed the bar and who doesn't, unlike Oregon. So. And then just an update on the Walt bed chart situation. So his case got, he's got both criminal charges and a civil contempt charge that our office is working on. He was supposed to have a trial next week. That got pushed off again because his attorney resigned and left doing public defender work entirely. So he has a new attorney. So that's going to be pushed out a little bit. Tanya didn't mention this, but the tax bills came out. Property tax. Yes.
Could I ask a question about the Bestard case?
Yeah.
So, what is the status of the property? Well, he's no longer in jail, correct?
Correct.
And so things are being pushed back. Is the property continuing to grow?
We have heard no reports that it is continuing to grow. That's the big concern. And that's why we have the civil contempt charges that if our position is simple. If he doesn't bring any more items onto the property, we're happy. But we want that to be memorialized by the courts.
But we still have a lien again for the work that's been done to date.
We do have a lien on the property. Yes.
Thank you.
But I didn't think he was living there.
We don't know where he's living, but we have received no reports of activity on the property.
Okay.
So, and that, well, no, one other thing. So, you may remember there's the class action lawsuit that Washington County is a part of related to people being held at the jail without because they haven't had a public defender appointed to them yet. There was another hearing in Eugene on that just this morning, and we're awaiting a ruling from the court on that. There was an ask to lessen the amount of time that you can be in jail without being appointed an attorney. The current judicial order is 10 days, and they've been asking for 72 hours. And we'll see where the court goes from there. That concludes my report.
That's mind-boggling. That'd be my political statement for that. Mark.
Good. Thank you very much, Director Willie and members of Clean Water Services Board. I'm sitting here today because Diane, Director Rogers, and several of other staff are with Clean Water Services Insurance Company at the Captive Insurance Conference in Hawaii. This week they will be returning on Friday, so they will be here next week. They get back. The other thing is we start our 31st annual leaf drop-off and food drive this weekend. This is some changes that the board was part of and CWAC was part of in terms of how we expand the leaf drop-off program. You may have seen sandwich boards in your neighborhood, Director Fye.
Not yet.
Not yet? Well, look for them. And so you also talked about last week.
I live in Aloha.
I know. Well, so it's mainly in the Aloha area. It's all in urban unincorporated.
Sometimes we feel neglected.
Well, I can show you exactly where they are. So we have there's 7 drop-off sites over 6 weekends across the Aloha area and also North Highway 26 too, that begin this weekend. So that's a very successful partnership with the Oregon Food Bank.
Okay. Keep an eye on him.
Your leaf drop-off,
Mhm.
not leaf pickup. But
Not leaf pickup, leaf drop-off. Yes.
I see. Okay. No comment. Okay, we all good? All right, we're gonna move into the first item, which is Office of Community Development Wood Stove Exchange Program Update. What a great program. You're doing a great job on that, and thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Billy, Commissioner Fine, Commissioner Therese. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. My name is Shannon Wilson, and I'm the program manager for the Office of Community Development. And we are really excited to be here today to give you an update on the Wood Stove Exchange Program. This program is a partnership between the Department of Health and Human Services and our office. And so I'm joined here today with Tim Davis, our housing rehabilitation specialist, and I believe Kathleen Johnson, who's a senior program coordinator with HHS, was going to join online. So she may be available for the discussion portion of our presentation. But before I hand it over to Tim, who's really the subject matter expert for this program, I did just want to highlight a couple components of the timing of this presentation. So why we're here before you today. And so the first of those is that the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, is moving forward with further tightening the requirements around outdoor air quality. And so since the Wood Stove Exchange Program began several years ago, it has been an important tool within the county in terms of helping the county overall meet the outdoor air quality requirements that the EPA has in place. And so as the EPA looks at tightening those, the Wood Stove Exchange Program can continue to be an important part of meeting those goals over time. And then the second component is that this Wood Stove Exchange Program, it relies on local support, both for the project size, so for the wood stoves or the other alternative source of heat that's replacing the older wood stove, and then also on the administrative side, so for staffing. And so currently we have administrative funding through this fiscal year, so through June 30th of 2024. And so part of the feedback we're hoping to get today from your board and direction is whether we as staff should pursue additional sources for administrative funding to support the program after this fiscal year. So acknowledging that there are a variety of potential sources for administrative funding. So just hoping for some direction around where we should spend our time in terms of pursuing those. So with that, I'll hand it over to Tim to go into our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. I hope this is relatable and riveting.
Not as much as A&T, I'm sorry.
So I'll focus on certainly some of the main points. So just recently, I completed my 900th home assessment. Probably 800 plus of those are in person. During COVID, we did almost 100 virtual visits, either by video or pictures. So one of the things we're talking about today is just the health effects of wood smoke particulate. You've heard that before, but we're going to review that. The extent of the number of these 900 households using their wood stoves as primary heat versus what was initially assessed with the DEQ in 2014. And then the change in the upcoming air quality standard. The EPA had noted they were going to change that in 2023. Various other priorities came up, and they're pretty sure they're going to change it in 2024, lower it to make it harder to attain, remain in attainment of clean air. And then the economics of possibly not meeting that standard.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On that very point, when you say they're lowering it, because I remember how we got into this scenario. So, and it was because we had some bad air and their detectors picked it up. And is that the part that they're going to lower, or is it the manufacturing standards on wood stove?
It's at this point, the 2024 will be the air quality standard that they will lower. And I'll go into that in a couple slides.
Thank you. Sorry.
Next slide. So we've completed, as of the building of this presentation, 676 exchanges. Now it's a little over 680. preventing 55 tons of wood smoke particulate, that's PM 2.5 and PM 10. I'll talk about that in a minute. Additionally, over 320 tons of other pollutants and gases. And we're also now capturing the amount of carbon dioxide we're preventing. And that's over 2,200 tons with these exchanges. We right now have funds in place for about 50 to 60 exchanges this fiscal year. We are on track to reach our original goal of 700 exchanges. Part of this presentation is, suggesting we stretch that goal. What is PM and what is it? How does it get into the lungs, into the air? So PM 2.5 or particulate matter are particularly particles directly linked to their potential for causing health problems. Small particles less than 10 micrometers in diameter pose the greatest problems because they can get deep into your lungs, and some particles as small as 2.5 may even get into your bloodstream. That's the number that the EPA focuses on. Exposure to such particles can affect both your lungs and your heart. Numerous scientific studies have linked particle pollution exposure to a variety of problems, including premature death in people with heart or lung disease, non-fatal heart attacks, irregular heartbeat, aggravated asthma, decreased lung function, and increased respiratory symptoms such as irritation of airways, coughing, or difficulty breathing. As mentioned earlier, the Wood Stove Exchange Program is designed to reduce this particulate matter pollution along with the harmful pollutants and gases, resulting in better air quality and a healthier community. So, Commissioner Willie, in the DEQ survey that was done in 2014, they surveyed over 1,000 people in this area, 3-county area. Of those over 1,000 surveyed, only 82 houses had uncertified wood stoves. So it was a small data set. And the DEQ determined at that point that 17% of the households, so, estimating, were using their wood stoves as primary heat. In our 900 assessments now, we see that about 63% of households are using their stoves for primary heat. So the amount of wintertime wood smoke that was initially assumed in 2014 is probably a quarter of actually what's out there. So the pie is much larger than we thought. So what are we going to do? We want to increase the number of exchanges we do and go forward there. So this is a slide showing the number of grants we supply to households that are below 80% of median family income. The red number is the number that are using their stoves for primary heat. So it's a significant portion of the lower income households. And then the other two are the $4,000 rebate amount, the $2,500 rebate amount, and then the $1,500 rebate amount. And you can see it's at least 50% in those, and it's much larger in the lower income. In fact, on the lower income side, 70% of those households are getting their wood for free, either through friends and family, Craigslist. I consider the $20 Forest Service permit free. You can go out and get up to 2 cords of wood with a $20 Forest Service permit from the office in Forest Grove.
There used to be a group that when you would like cut down a tree and you didn't want the wood or whatever, that they would come and.
They're still there.
Is it when? What's their name?
Washington County Woodcutters.
Yeah. So they're still doing that.
I helped them out a few months ago and I was the youngest person there. So they're doing a great job. They find those trees that have fallen or people take them down and they season the wood, and then they have about 50 accounts that they supply wood to that are, they supply it to them for free.
It's a great program.
Yeah.
If they have the right stove.
Good point.
Is that a criteria? I mean, just staying with that for a second. I mean, is that a criteria at all that they have to have and if they don't, do these people
Are they a
encourage
reference
them
point?
to? Yeah.
They are a reference point. Even one of their members recently changed out his stove. So I'm in contact with them a couple times a year just to stay in touch and volunteer once or twice a year and take a couple dozen donuts over there. And we work hard for 3 or 4 hours and they supply, like I said, about 50 accounts with 1 or 2 cords of wood, and they're promoting the program at the same time. So
Yes, thank you.
this slide just splits the number a little further, just showing that folks, households under the 60% median family income and under 40% are, seriously reliant on wood stoves as primary heat and to decrease their energy burden and their energy costs. So let's talk about the Harefield Monitor and the EPA attainment level. So the oval on the right is the number of days in the past 7 winters where we've gone over the attainment level. The first 3 there from 2017, 18, and 19, actually, if you go over an attainment level 1 day, 3 years in a row, you can be in non-attainment. Now, 2018 included a day in October where there was wildfires. So the EPA excluded that as a exclusionary event. So it may look like we should have been in non-attainment, but we weren't. They will exclude wildfire events from these numbers. But the DEQ or the EPA is probably, and they've said so through recent information, that they're going to reduce the number in 2024 to 25 micrograms per cubic meter, which is the orange oval. And you can see if we were at 25 micrograms per cubic meter over the last 7 winters, we'd be in non-attainment 19 days. So it's very apparent here that we need to continue to reduce wintertime particulate as well as whatever we do during the rest of the year.
So, but this year, we reached on attainment at the 35 level.
1 day.
Okay, but if we had 3 years in a row,
Correct.
then okay.
Right.
So
But it is-
24, 25.
The EPA has stated they've already done an internal vote that they're going to reduce this to 25 micrograms per cubic meter. It's just the date was pushed off from 2023 to 2024.
So will it be a running total then so if they do change it,
No,
does our
They'll
number?
start again.
Okay.
So we've got next winter to stay below there and continue that way. But it's just an example of where we would be if the number had changed a few years ago. Good. And then just informally, we keep track of the wintertime particulate, again, in those months of November, December, January, and February. And since the Wood Stove Exchange program and other county strategies like the burn ban and some other strategies to reduce particulate, we've seen a reduction most years, except for this past winter. We had a large number in February, and that moved the average up. This is a monthly average. This is a slightly different number, but we do this to just see if we're on a downward trend in the wintertime, and we are. Some of the things we've done additionally in the last few years, with the pandemic, we did a contactless old stove turn-in event in 2021. We continued that in 2022. And then this year, we actually took 40 stoves off the market. So a total of 76 stoves in 3 years. These are old stoves that many are still in use, but we're offering $250 for people to turn them in. No exchange, just, time to turn them in and take them off the market. It is illegal to sell, swap, give away old uncertified stoves in Oregon, but a lot of people are unaware of that rule. And that's why we hold this event. Very successful this year. In addition, we have newer partners in the last year or so. The Energy Trust Community Partner Funding Program is a program that was authorized by the Oregon Public Utilities Commission. Energy Trust can do more for low-income households. We do 2 or 3 things with that. In addition to the home assessment for the Wood Stove Exchange program, I perform a home energy assessment that the Energy Trust has, a similar document, 2 or 3 pages. And the program receives $250 incentive for doing that home energy assessment. And now these households are eligible for increased incentives for energy saving measures. We've actually had 3 of these households receive new ductless heat pumps through that program. So the costs weren't associated to the wood stove exchange program. Those funds for those ductless heat pumps came from the Energy Trust CPF, as we call it, Community Partner Funding Program. In addition, we're seeing more $1,500 rebate participants in the last year or so due to the federal 30% tax credit for wood stoves, pellet stoves, or efficient heat pumps. So that's driving a lot more rebates on that side. And that's a 30% tax credit up to $2,000 of your costs over and above the rebate from the wood stove exchange program. And just a slide here to show what type of device offers what type of benefit to both the county and the household. Changing out from an old uncertified stove to a new wood or pellet stove reduces particulate matter reduction and greenhouse gases by up to 96% at that house. And then you lower energy burdens, offer resiliency with a wood stove in power outages as well. Heat pumps, you basically get 100% emissions reduction at the site, and some of the same benefits to the household. Efficient gas stove, there's very, very little emissions from a gas stove or insert. So you're looking at a 99% reduction. The same way with a gas furnace. We've changed out a few wood stoves and put in a few gas furnaces. And then again, we're just mentioning the collaborations through the Energy Trust Community Partner Funding Program, the new Oregon Department of Energy heat pump program for renters and owners. The renter program has been out since July. The owner program should be out in the next couple of weeks. And that offers incentives of $5,000 to $11,000 to change out bulk fuels being wood stoves, oil, propane to heat pumps. So that's going to be a significant help. We're part of a tri-county effort, and Earth Advantage is the administrator of this region. So it's Clackamas County Low Income Weatherization, Multnomah County Weatherization, Multnomah County Environmental Health, our department, Health and Human Services, and Washington County Community Action are all part of that regional effort. And then we're just working more with referrals through the Energy Trust, through the DOE, through Community Action, housing rehabilitation. The momentum has just really built terrifically these last year or so since we've kind of opened things up after, I don't want to say after the pandemic, but now that things are calmer. So I mentioned earlier that, the initial goal was 700 wood stoves, thinking that's going to reduce that number down to a better average of 25 micrograms per cubic meter. But that was based on a very small percentage of people using their stoves for primary heat. We know that percentage is much larger. So we've continually considered expanding the program to 1,000 stoves or more. Appreciate very much the administrative funding this year. Again, we're working with Intel, City of Hillsborough, and others on additional funding for those grants and rebates. There's just so many benefits to not just the regional airshed, but each household. Reducing energy burdens, healthier indoor air, resilience in power outages, filtration during wildfire events, etc. Any questions?
All right. Go ahead.
You talked about Intel, and they've been a partner since the beginning of the program, correct?
Yes.
And has their partnership gone down in terms of dollar amount?
It has, but we've worked very hard in stretching those dollars.
Okay.
The Energy Trust Community Partner Funding Program has helped us do that. For example, outreach materials, we just purchased nearly $1,000 worth of rack cards and postcards and things like that. That was funded through the community partner funding program. It wasn't from the administrative costs of the county. So
So is there a forward-looking view of Intel's continued partnership and the other partnerships as well?
yes, Hillsborough has expressed funding for this fiscal year and next fiscal year. Intel seems very positive about continuing. And then we're also working on collaborations with others at the county, as well as Metro. We just had a meeting today on potential funding through the climate pollution reduction grants.
And in reading that, part of where I'm going to is in reading the information, I didn't see like a budget and, you know, the amount that was being donated, so to speak, from the various organizations.
Intel has continually funded $75,000 per year. And they are a generous funder of the Old Stove Turn-In event as well, hosted here in Hillsborough. And then Intel is saying they'll fund us for $200,000 in 2024. We should see the first 100,000 of that in January, hopefully. And then continually working on other options. When the DEQ, for example, when the DEQ has a violation and they fine a company, if it's relevant to air quality and it's in this area, I will send them a request letter that they fund through their supplemental environmental project fund.
But thank you, Commissioner. That is great feedback for our annual report to consider the, more detailed look at the financial components of the programs. Thank you.
And when I look at the partners or the partners list here, it's the list is long, but my experience tells me that there's different weights around those partnerships. And it used to be that we had Intel's logo on a lot of these materials too. Is that right? No? No? Okay. But it's been going on since what, 2017?
Yep.
Nafisa?
I don't really have big questions. I was surprised. I'm glad you asked the finance part when you said you're looking for direction in terms of what other fundings you should look into. Because in the report, I didn't get that message from the reading material. So a good recommendation to include the funding, at least the display of where your funding comes from and where the deficit is. And then, so I'm in support for you to go look for whatever funding you need out there. I don't want to assume, but I think there might be money out there to do this kind of work because everybody is invested to breathe in clean air. And if they're not, they should be. So there's that case to make. And especially one other thing that was interesting, if you looked into, is there federal grants that you can tap into since there's that 30% or whatever percent, I don't remember, for households. And so there might be, I don't know if there is, but that piqued my interest as you were presenting. So those are my comments. And then the questions I have was, I don't know, my computer turned off, but you said cleaner devices and I didn't pick it up. What kind, is it like electric stove that you're exchanging to people? I couldn't recall some of the materials. And then the other question I had, it didn't come up on the PowerPoint slides, but it was in your report, was a picture of all the old stoves that you collect, the wood stoves that you collect. What happens to them and how do you dispose? Those are the questions I just.
We are working on federal funding. That was one of the meeting. That was part of the meeting today. There's 2 or 3 sources. Certainly the IRA funding, a portion of that being the climate pollution reduction grants, as well as the Justice 40 initiative. So we're looking at all those possibilities. If I mentioned it in last year's presentation, San Antonio did a study of what if they went into non-attainment, and San Antonio area is very similar to Portland, with Portland and the suburbs being about 2.5 million people. San Antonio is exactly the same. The study that San Antonio did, the low number of the economic impact or the economic loss if they went into non-attainment was over $600 million. So, I mean, there's other areas of Oregon and other areas of the country certainly that have been in non-attainment. They're not nearly as large as the Portland area. But the phrase is you're in a 10-year bad date with the EPA because permits are limited for infrastructure improvements. Permits are limited for emissions. Permits are limited for anything that causes large emissions, which could be road construction, building construction. So it could have a very adverse impact on this area. So that's very important. The stoves that are turned in at the event, it's at Far West Recycling, and they recycle them, basically immediately.
Oh, and then examples of the other things that people might replace their wood stove with.
Yeah,
So it
sorry.
could be a cleaner burning wood stove or other, yeah.
Initially, when the program was developed, there was a lot of questions of like, what devices do we offer as options? And wood stoves was kind of always in there because we knew the lower income households rely on wood stoves for heat. And as you see through some of the data, we have free heat. Most of those households are burning 3 cords of wood, which on the open market is probably $1,200. So we put in new wood stoves about 45% of the time. About 55% of the time, we put in pellet or gas stoves or heat pumps, whether those are ducted or ductless, and a handful of gas furnaces in the past. Heat pumps are gaining popularity, especially with the tax credit that I mentioned earlier. We're lucky here that the utility infrastructure is pretty good. So resiliency is still that's an issue with some households in power outages, especially in the more rural areas. It may take a few days for service trucks to reach some of the more rural areas of the county versus the more urban areas. And other areas of the country aren't in such good shape with the infrastructure. So we're a little lucky here.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that when we started this program, our target was 700. Now we're about ready to achieve that 700, and we're moving it. What's the number out there? Do we know what the total is?
It basically going by the numbers that DEQ had in their survey and then the summary, the amount of wood smoke based on 17% as primary heat, it's about 4 times more of what we assume based on 4 times more households using their stoves as primary heat. So, it's not unimaginable to figure, 2,800 exchanged might get that number down. I mean, 1,000 is a first step.
Well, that's pretty amazing. And the tax credit you talked about, you said was for pumps. Isn't there credits for new furnaces too out there?
Northwest Natural has some incentives for gas furnaces, but they're fairly minimal, maybe $300 or $400.
Oh, okay.
Just the benefit, the cost benefit there isn't the same as switching to a heat pump.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also, switching over of the failure of the non-attainment of this criteria. It's pretty doggone important, and it's a little bit concerning that when they drop it to 25, it would appear, based on the information you showed on slide 8 there, that we're in trouble. And the punishments that they have at their, ability to implement is pretty significant. And it's certainly going to impact our economic development growth capabilities in Washington County. And like you said, road projects even. So, but I have to believe that this is all not wood stove driven.
It isn't, but we're lucky to have the DEQ lab right here in Hillsborough. And we've been over there a few times to discuss with them. They do multiple types of measurements at Harefield, including just particulate running past a laser beam measuring the numbers, as well as they will then have something that captures the particulate and they can weigh it. And then they can test the compounds that are within it. And there's different compounds in wood smoke particulate versus diesel particulate. They can tell by what the chemical makeup is. So those numbers you saw, of 19 exceedances in the winter, that is mostly wintertime wood smoke. It doesn't seem, because it's cold, it doesn't seem like we reach the levels of maybe a wildfire event, but we do. Some of those wintertime levels are the same as the summertime wildfire events we get, especially when there's wintertime inversions where there's warmer air above us.
So just my last question. So we drive out into the country and we see all of the wood burning that goes on out there, only they're piles of basically trees that have been taken down, stumps and those kinds of things. So does any of that play into this? I mean, or does that all go someplace else and doesn't come into our test area?
It can. It's possible that one exceedance this past February was, I actually drove around, was driving around that day and I noticed a large agricultural burn, let's say, right off of 26 in the north end of Hillsborough, which is going to feed right to the Harefield.
Right next to Rice
monitor.
Museum, wasn't it?
Pardon?
Wasn't that right next to the?
Right across, pretty much right across the road from the Rice Museum, yes.
Yeah.
And that was February 3rd. That number's from February 3rd. So it does play into it sometimes. But at the same time, that's something that the EPA is not going to consider an exceptional event. So the county does a good job of educating forest management and agriculture to burn between November and March because, there's more rain to kind of tamp down the particulate, but then there's certainly some clear days that that's going to affect the numbers.
Yeah. Just on a clear day, you can drive around out there and see smoke plumes all over the place. So yeah. Okay. Anything else?
No.
Great presentation. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Cam,
Appreciate it.
you're doing a great job and we appreciate what you're doing there for our air. Thank you very
Thank you very much.
Shannon, you too, and Kathleen. Thanks. Next up. I don't know, where are we? Next up.
Government relations. Government relations.
Government legislative agenda development. How could I forget that?
One of my teammates just wandered away. Okay. So we're gonna have all four of us up here, but
Who's your fourth?
Soccer.
Oh, soccer. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, he was here
he was here.
and he wasn't.
My got a quick phone call he had to answer, so I'm just gonna get us started. Oh, there we go. So have full TR team here to start working on our 2024 legislative agenda development, both from Clean Water Services and from the county.
Finally.
Yeah, so we're all
3. Back to the original number.
one empty chair. So we're where we started in 2019. So that's very exciting. But we're all here to present or start the conversation with the board around what you would like your 2024 legislative agenda, both at the state and federal levels, to look like. And I took very short notes, so hopefully I get all my points out and then let the team talk too. So to start with, just agenda of what we're going to walk through today, and I'm going to make a comment here on what is listed and what there has been a change of plans. So to be really frank, things got way complicated, but in looking at what we think the state agenda likely needs to be in conversations with departments, and looking at what we were able to accomplish in 2023, there are items of interest that we think might be a good recommendation to your board to consider as continuing from the 2023 agenda into the 2024. So we'll walk through those. And then there are a couple of topics that might be for your consideration to pursue in 2024. And then there are a couple of hot topics that we had intended to talk about today, but we're only really going to focus on the housing hot topic. Measure 110 has proven to be, every time we think we have a handle on the breadth of issues in a one Washington County perspective, it turns out we don't, that we have to dig further. So we have not provided sufficient information to the board to really have a comprehensive conversation. In addition to that, with two of the commissioners out, we don't think it's appropriate for direction to come to us. And so we're going to talk when we get to those slides, instead of about what's on those slides, what we're going to do to prepare you to have a proper conversation around a framework for Measure 110. But we'll get to that in a little bit. And then, of course, we do have a federal agenda. These don't change largely because, you know, the federal agenda never moves forward. We heard today that they thought they had a speaker nominee and then he withdrew. So everything's going great. Yeah, again. We've asked David from our Van Scoyoc Associates to go ahead and nominate himself at this point. So maybe we'll get some stuff done.
Or give it to the guy who's consistently getting.
So,
Careful.
but
All right, back.
there is some proposed additions to the federal agenda from Clean Water Services. So Tracy will walk through that. And then, of course, just to ground us in what those next steps are. So we'll talk through all of this as we move forward. But just as a reminder to the board, we have two overall policy questions for your consideration. What is your direction to us for establishing the 2024 legislative agenda, particularly related to the priorities? And then second is on this concept of policy position frameworks, which are different and outside of the agenda process on these legislative hot topics. And we'll go through what I mean by that a little bit later on and kind of dig out what directions we would need from the board if you were to look at that. So to start with, we'll look at what could possibly be continued from 2023 into the 2024 priorities. Obviously, we did a lot of work in the 23 session, but there are things that are left undone. This comes to questions mostly around funding, shocking. So for the county, we took a look at what we were able to accomplish and what we were not. And so these are the three county priorities that really need to move forward. But as a reminder, the 2024 session is short. So we don't do all of the work that we do in a long session. We have 6 weeks. They make budget adjustments and they make policy changes. They pretend like they're not going to do anything major, but that's not how a short session has ever worked. But we do try to walk in with a shorter list of priorities as a result of the shortness of the session. But that budget reallocation really goes to this first continuing priority that we would recommend to your board to secure, stabilize, and sustainable funding for services that the state requires the county to provide. This is primarily focused on the community corrections conversation because we've been starting to make that headway, but want to make sure it's on the list. We've also been looking at if there's any potential in the law library funding. They did get a small increase, but it's not reflective of the numbers of years that they've been stuck at the same level. So if there's opportunity to have that conversation, start it now, look to 2025 budget and maybe have made our case. There's other programs that still could use some more plussing up of funding, but the legislature has been very coy about what is available in that funding box, given the pressures of a very large kicker, concerns about long-term budget sustainability and short session politics. So that would be where we would, what we see as a continuing county priority that can move into 2024 quite easily within the agenda. And I'll turn it over to Zachar to talk about the second bullet point.
Thank you, Erin. For the record, my name is Zachar Khan, Government Relations Manager here at Washington County. The second plank that you see within our priorities from the last session was develop policies to enable the county to recruit and retain the talent necessary for our communities to thrive. You'll recall in the last session, we brought forth 3 workforce bills and none of them made it through. In persistent themes, both at the tour that we had of the CAT, as well as in other places with legislators, it has been hard and really challenging to get a commitment on behavioral health workforce. But within the last week, I've started to see some movement. So there's definitely a possibility that we can see a legislative investment into behavioral health workforce. And in fact, I think it was just yesterday, there was an article in the Oregonian that layered across the entire state how the behavioral health workforce is really challenged. And I think that's finally getting on legislators' radar. So that's why we want to have this continue to be a priority.
What would be the ramp up time for that?
For there to be another investment?
If they made an investment in behavioral health and in that aspect that you're talking about,
Yeah.
how long before we would see some benefits of that actually coming through that?
Yeah, so from the investment that was made in 2021, it already increased the number of licensees within the state. So we saw a significant growth in the social work sector. I think the number of licenses went up 500, and it also led to more diversity within that field. Part of the challenge, and especially in relation to the subject, is that there are internal kind of challenges within the state to get people licensed. So for counselors to get licensed, I was able to pull some data. For counselors to get licensed in the state, so say you're coming from another state and you're trying to get credentialed here, it takes about 2 weeks for you to go through that licensure process. For social workers, there's a 6-month backlog. And so when individuals or entities are trying to hire people don't want to wait in a 6-month queue if they can go to another state and get through in a week. So some of these backlogs are creating challenges for people to be able to hire within our current system. There's additional challenges that our behavioral team has identified, from administrative burdens to lowering those. But in terms of seeing outcomes on funding, that bill that passed was in 2021, and 2 years later, we're seeing significant growth within those sectors. So it can have an immediate effect. I mean, you're talking about some of the funds that the county got was for retention bonuses that were utilized to retain employees. Some of the funds can be used for scholarships, so that immediately infuses additional capacity into social work and counseling programs. Paying for schooling or education programs for peer counselors can be an immediate boost to get somebody credentialed through that.
It's also, my understanding is it's also for 2-year programs to get people into that pipeline as well. So it can be that money going to community colleges and people out the door. The workforce needs in behavioral health, it's like a pyramid. I mean, there's a lot that needs to go into it. But I was pretty happy to see the head nodding this morning at the CAT tour. There was a lot of understanding, at least with the people that were there. Seemed to be, yeah, that makes sense. And I think talking about the fact that here we are making this big investment in this great CAT, we need to have the staff to make that work. And I think that's a really good talking point, and it makes sense for individuals.
Thank you.
And then the third bullet point here, this one, I think, just to kind of lay some reality around things that I put on slides, additional funding related to the courthouse is probably going to be more of a challenge in a short session, but it is a piece of the priority conversation from 2023 that did not move forward. So I thought I would offer it up here. The reason why it would be a bigger challenge in 2024 is because it's unlikely that that budget's going to shift sufficiently to find the funds that we have asked for the courthouse. But that doesn't mean we don't continue to prioritize it. So that way, when it comes to the final budget decisions in the 25 session, we have continued to make our case and build the momentum and support within our delegation, saying this has been a priority for years. We need to come to the table to find solutions. And given everything else you're going to be demanding out of our criminal justice and civil court system, this is going to be part of that solution building in Washington County. So again, budget adjustments are challenging in a short session. That does not preclude it from being included as a priority in 2024, but just kind of creating a picture of the likelihood of things moving forward as you give us direction on what things you would like to see us continue into the 2024 session. With that, happy to answer any further questions about any of these points or seek any feedback that you might have about moving forward. with those. I know it's only three of you. Can have the conversation with the two remaining commissioners before we come back. I'll get into the next steps and how we'll get there. But just kind of looking for the general thought process around continuation of the 2023 pieces.
You have a comment, either of you?
I just think that these make sense to me. 'Cause we're talking all the time about unfunded mandates, and that's what the first bullet is all about. And that's the most important thing to us, I believe, at this point in time. And the other is from there we go into the workforce issue, which is absolutely critical. So, and the conversation has to start on the courthouse.
Continue. We
I'm
started
sorry.
it. We need to
Sorry,
continue.
yes, yes. Well, it needs to.
We're still late in the game, and it's kind of like Mark and his team having to beat the drum for Scoggins Dam for all these years. And so hopefully we're going to be a lot faster than that. But
We're an expedited action.
Just
so you
With the
know.
better outcome.
yeah, we're number one. Wait a minute. Well, anyway, we'll get there later. You have anything?
Yeah, to answer your question, Aaron, the 3 bullet points that you have here, pretty ambitious for a short session. And I'm wondering, like, is Washington County pretty much gonna be competing against each other? Because I was in that room when behavioral health workforce challenge came up. And I too recall seeing a lot of head nods. In fact, it was the Senate president that teed up that really said, what can we do to help? So I feel like that seemed to be winnable. I don't know. I project as winnable idea in the short session. But then if you're also going for community corrections and law libraries, and then adding this big gigantic conversation that needs to be there is no low hanging fruit when it comes to the court, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I heard you because you really had a sort of like a logical reasoning behind and qualified that last bullet point. But then the other ones, should those be a conversation for the big session, the large session, the longer session?
I think that there is also momentum, especially particularly related to community corrections between the Community Corrections Directors Association, where Nate is the president of that. We have already started to make some pretty significant headway in that conversation for 1 year of additional funding. So the ask is $16 million to backfill for 1 year's worth of funding within the biennium. It was a $32 million hole. So that conversation, I think, we have allies in that conversation with other counties. I think the law library is a longer shot. So if there is a place to resize, it would be around anything outside of community corrections when it comes to the funding, other than just don't add any more unfunded mandates because we don't have funds to fund them. And then maybe put the courthouse to the side. But I think that by leaving it within the priorities and recognize that at the end of the day, if we had to come back to the board to say what needs to happen in 2023, we can have that conversation. But it needs to be there for purposes of showing that this is a need that this commission is dedicated towards pursuing. That would be my recommendation at this point in time, is to say that these things are important. It might not happen in 2024, but we're not going to stop talking about it in 2024 and saying, if you magically find a secondary purse, it'd be really great if you could do this one thing that's been asked for year after year on the courthouse and the law libraries.
Okay. I think, do you know if this is going to be also a priority for the short session in 2024? Not necessarily League of Cities, but more so for the Oregon Association of Counties.
We are going to work through the process of trying to get it on the AOC's list of priorities, but we're already working with the Oregon, with other counties. So Lane County, Multnomah County, and Clackamas County have, Deschutes County, and a couple of what is sometimes referred to as frontier counties, so the more rural, southern, eastern, all of them are already talking to their legislators related to community corrections. So that work is being done across the state. And I think that AOC will get there, but at this point in time, I think with Nate's role, it is really important that the county itself be part of that push.
Isn't workforce development also kind of a statewide need?
Yes.
It isn't, I wouldn't, okay.
Yeah, it is a statewide need. I think that it's something that is going to be recognized. It's something that is going to be part of the state's legislative conversation pretty heavily. And I think we need to be proactively engaging and finding those solutions. And by prioritizing it, it gives Walker the opportunity to continue the incredible work he's done to build that coalition and put Washington County at the forefront of saying we can't solve things without workforce.
Mhm. Yeah, no big statements for me. Go for it, and like you have, but I think let me know what I could do to help in terms of being engaged, especially the workforce.
Yesterday, we got the invite for the 5th annual gathering of legislators and community leaders for that breakfast that we've been having for a while. I'm assuming that you and your team are engaged in the messaging of that, or is that basically as this is put on by what the Washington County Circuit Court group?
Yeah, there's a group we assist where asked because it is directed out of folks that are not the county, but we work with Aaron Calvert to coordinate with that to make sure that we're helping with the legislative work and making sure that we're all on the same page as far as everything between all of the different folks who work within the courthouse, from court staff, DA, public defenders, and civil users. So it's a big, complicated building with a lot of people who need it to function in a way that they're not afraid to walk in or walk out at any given time. So we work in coordination with them. That event itself is led by that coalition, and then we take their messaging and work it into the messaging that we provide back to the legislature for those who are not able to attend.
Yeah, it just seems like this is a great start to the conversation, but it does surprise me sometimes that we are sitting here looking at what are our priorities for the 24th session, but I don't ever hear our legislators actually getting together and having that same conversation as a body and saying, what do we have to make sure we fund first versus where can we spread the peanut butter? And it's a little frustrating to me that that this isn't a priority to them. And so this is a pretty short list. I realize it's a short session, good short list. So then we'll talk about what 25 looks like. Yeah.
At that conversation in 24.
Yep.
Yeah, wait.
Perfect.
Don't start now.
Go forth and just keep pounding the drum, I guess.
Yep.
So
Turn it over to Tracy for
Could I just have one more question about, so these are our priorities, but we still have the hot topics that and I suspect that those will fit into the priorities as well. So we're not, this is not a limited number here.
Unfortunately, no one limit. Well, there is a limit on the number of bills legislators are allowed to put forward. That doesn't mean the concepts are not limited. So what the priorities do is say, right now, spend most of your energy here. And as we talk about what policy frameworks provide in that conversation on those hot topics, there is potential dovetailing. Obviously, workforce is going to come into housing conversations and other hot topics that might come forward.
All right.
So,
and when it comes to Measure 10, I know we're not 110. I know we're not going to be talking about that, but it also that has its peaks and valleys as it moves forward. So I suspect our attention will be focused at certain points.
Yeah.
Okay, Tracy, you're on.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Board of Directors for Clean Water Services. For the record, Tracy Rainey, Senior Policy Analyst. Good to see you all. So we, in early September, pulled together an internal team at Clean Water Services with various staff from a variety of our departments to take a look at our 2023 legislative agenda for the state and federal priorities, and to make any suggestions for revisions, items to take off, anything to add to the agenda. So we had that conversation. It was really good discussion amongst our staff. A lot of the items that you'll see today before you are a reflection of a continuation from the 2023 agenda, similar to the county. There was some rewording to a few of the items. So on this slide, you'll see our water infrastructure investment priority. There were some slight modifications to the language just to reflect the areas where we're having those specific conversations around water related infrastructure. It's not just the traditional water quality related infrastructure treatment plants, conveyance systems. It's also talking about infrastructure that supports growth in communities and really does kind of spread across a variety of areas and issues that we're having conversations with the legislature on. Infrastructure readiness is a continuation that has not had any changes from the 2023 agenda. Reuse implementation, I'm really excited to be able to use the word implementation because we did have success with passing a reuse bill during the 2023 legislative session. So our focus will be on the implementation and working with DEQ and key stakeholders as we work to move all of that forward in the next year or so. I will move, unless there are questions on those first three items, I'll move to our remaining items.
I could
that
just,
are
on the water
continuation.
reuse, it
Yes.
seems like, that's, we've heard, in our sessions, we've heard what your objectives are, increasing the amount of water reuse and those things. That would seem to really resonate well with our legislators. So are we getting a lot more traction in that regards when we're talking about funding for this implementation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say, yes, we are getting traction. And I think too, in our updates around our decision on Scoggins Dam and to fix the existing dam, we always get the question of what about additional stored water? How are you going to meet future compliance on temperature in particular? And our answer to that is a reuse. And I think there's a lot of interest, a lot of support from legislators. The biggest item that we needed to move forward on, though, was updating the regulatory framework from DEQ. Once that work is done, which won't be an easy or quick effort, but hopefully will be complete in the next year or 2 years, I think that's going to open up opportunities for a lot more projects to move forward, which hopefully then will mean project dollars to follow.
Yeah.
And doesn't our relationship with Representative Helm, his focus on water related issues, it's very helpful that he's here in Washington County as well.
It is incredibly helpful. We can't, yes, we do
Not
not want to
overstate.
lose him as a legislator. He was instrumental in incorporating our reuse language that we worked with Association of Clean Water Agencies on into the drought package bill last session. So
And we frequently remind him that he's a customer. too.
Yeah.
So don't forget who's taking care of you. So
And I have, I always report on it, but I do have regular meetings with Representative Helm regarding all sorts of issues. And he's a great advocate for us.
oh, yes.
okay, so on the next slide, these are all items that were on the 2023 legislative agenda. No significant changes that were made there. I will just note the one item that was taken off of the agenda was around support for DEQ's wastewater permitting program. It is not a budget session, so the biennial budget for DEQ passed, so we did take that item off just to reflect that. So that those are kind of the changes to our carried forward items from 2023 going into 2024. And now I think unless there's questions on these remaining items, Erin's going to talk a little bit about new items.
We're both going to talk about.
Well,
new
we're
items.
both going to talk about new items, but I'll let you push the button.
Oh, thanks. So we're going to talk about new items. That's what that slide says. So there are two things that have come forward from recognizing what a short session has the opportunity to do, one for the county, one for Clean Water Services. So related to the county, in working with the Land Use and Transportation Department and some of the issues that the board is aware of related to a couple of 120-day timeline issues that we've had, leading to developers filing writs of mandamus and cutting off the local appeals process. At this point in time, we've made all the internal changes that LUT can make, but there is the possibility of pursuing something at the legislative level that would have to be really mindful of the larger conversation around housing development and timelines and costs. But there is a path forward, I believe, to have a conversation with the legislature about making sure that community voice does not get lost in the land use process. I mean, the number one goal is always internally, we don't run into the problem again, and LUT is doing that. But also finding a solution so that the legislature has not compounded potential issues, especially given the complexity of ongoing conversations related to development that will occur in urban unincorporated areas. So this is a potential new priority for you to ask your GR team, is to pursue a legislative conversation around how to preserve that local process, or the opportunity for people to move out of a local process, but continue to have, make sure that legal compliance is there when it comes to land use decision making. I will note here that this is going to be a challenging issue to have legislative excitement about in a short session, particularly when a lot of the focus in the housing conversation is around making everything faster and cutting off discretion, which is a conversation in a couple of slides. But I do think this is an important way in which we've told the community we will be talking to our legislators about pursuing this. And if the board prioritizes it for your GR team, it is meeting that commitment. So that is why that's recommended as a potential new priority. It would be a challenge in 2024 to make a big, but it's not worth pursuing. So that is that recommendation for a potential new priority. So it would be a total of 4 priorities for the county, the 3 that would be continuing from 2023, and then this additional land use priority to meet community need.
Well, really, we're kind of putting that on the list to just tee that for 25. Probably.
I think that it's probably going to be a longer conversation and needs to be brought into the mix around things that are related to the housing production conversation that's happening, and we need to be putting it on the table now so that we can work it into the overall solutions as we look at what it means to go through a local permitting process and an appeals process, and when the statute can be used as a shield versus as a Damocles sword hanging over our heads.
All right,
Go ahead.
so the item for clean water services that we're proposing to add to the agenda for the state legislative session is really intended to reflect conversations that are related to community development, including housing production, and to ensure that requirements that are included in water quality permits are not interpreted to be open for potential waivers or exemptions. So we're seeing a lot of conversations around various requirements that may or may not be deemed to be supportive of advancing housing production quickly. Some of those items happen to be in federal or state water quality permits. And so we're really doing a lot of work to make sure it is understood where a potential exemption would run us afoul of federal Clean Water Act requirements. So that is what this particular priority is intended to reflect, in just a variety of areas where there may be that potential conflict at play.
And I would guess that is supported by our public health.
It's primarily a clean water services. We haven't had the conversation with public health, but I imagine anything that would put the public health in detriment,
Yeah,
just not going to smile upon. It's also there is an impact to LUT in that process of putting us in a position where we have to ask somehow any land use application that comes to us that would put clean water services in violation of their permits. Not a position anyone at the county wants to put us in, because they're important public health regulations.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Advocate to ensure. So you're not doing this right now? Is this something you're starting?
This is more of a, I think, defensive, slightly position for us. This is coming up and has popped up already in a number of conversations. So it's not something that we'll be proactively bringing forward. But in legislative conversations, we're watching closely the language and working to get any amendment language if we feel like it does not provide clarity on that potential conflict with our permits.
And it's not something that we're not doing now, but by adding it to the priorities list, it says it's not just staff that's worried about this, it's our commissioners and directors for clean water services that want to make sure that this is the stance, not just of our staff who think technically, but of our board who thinks strategically about the needs of the community. So priorities are about saying this isn't just a minor issue, this is a thing we have to do. But between Clean Water Services and your county lobby team, we have taken this position in past conversations, but this gives us an opportunity to put it in paper and get official action by the board to say this is of utmost importance for us as a board of directors to Clean Water Services.
But I think the question was also leaning toward, tell me that we are continuing to do these things currently. And
We are.
So this is more just ensuring that nothing gets in the way of that continuation.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it sounds like there's room for these two things to be added to the state agenda. And again, we'll continue this conversation. This is the first conversation around the agenda, not the final. And then the final piece is as I was walking through this with a pretty robustly new team at our housing department, they took a look. So as our agenda currently states, we have general principles that are big picture things like no unfunded mandates, local control over local decision-making, a list of about 7 of them. Then we have the priorities, which are the immediate work of specific intention. And then we also have the board give us guiding principles when it comes to department-based work. And the housing principles that exist in that guiding principles for the department, our new housing team has taken a look and they've asked that we think more broadly about some of the things and also make some refinements to reflect the way we talk about housing within the housing department. So this is more of a moment to inform you that I'll be working with the housing team to create some drafted, proposed, additional, and reformed guiding principles to bring back to your board for your consideration. Some of the topics that they noted, and they're continuing their conversations internally, are around tenant protections and rent assistance. Those are not included. Talking about serving communities of color as part of our guiding principles, and then promoting system alignment between what the state thinks that they need to create versus what we already do, and making sure there's always alignment and local expertise brought into those. So this is going to be part of the consideration of an updated agenda, is making sure our guiding principles reflect the work that needs to be done, but not as a priority of like this legislative session get dollars, but as we do an analysis of any sort of legislation, we know where you want us to head. So we'll have those conversations with housing to create the proposal and talk with the members of the board before we draft them into a proposed 2024 agenda. And that conversation is ongoing. We've had some earlier this morning with our new director and her essentially new leadership team that deals with GR related things. So
Molly Rogers. Good job, Molly. I
Yep.
like these new additions.
Yep.
I was gonna say, I think this came from Molly, but then I was like, if it didn't, I want Molly to be the one that. So thank you.
It was
Good addition.
Yeah, their team is being very thoughtful about how we approach these conversations around policy and principles and making sure we're reflecting what we
I
need
can
to
tell
be.
you the community can relate these principles. These are things that are very like, not common sense, but like everyday working people. Tenant protection, rent assistance, these are things that are, thank you. Great.
So this was just a reminder, and we're gonna take a little bit of, head nods here, but the policy question being, what do you want in your 2024 legislative priorities? And it sounds like you're comfortable with both what's been proposed by your county team and your Clean Water Services folks to move forward to start crafting a draft agenda that will come back to you in December with better words, clearer words, and intention. But we will have conversations with the two missing commissioners before we do anything final.
Certainly.
Yeah, and I would like to request that those discussions, especially around 110 and housing, be held in a work session format because I want to, I want to be able to make sure that we're all discussing this together.
Yeah, so that's the legislative hot topics conversation, and we'll have that conversation about the conversation. That's gonna, that. But yes, there needs to be a work session conversation. There can't be one-offs to try and triangulate everyone.
That was a motion I would second. Unanimous.
But
It's a
there
request.
needs to be a conversation with the board to make sure that we can present you with sufficient information to talk about these big picture items and how to guide the work that we do and guide the work of departments as we respond to information. But so I'll just go ahead and talk about the state legislature's hot topics. So there are two things that are clearly coming forward, continuing to come forward in 2024. It's not the end of what these hot topics are going to be, but these two seemed like we were going to have a lot of information to provide to you. But I think housing, we have a lot more. Measure 110 has gotten very complicated, which is why we are not wanting to talk about it here for a lot of different reasons. So what we have talked about in creating is something that's not part of the agenda, but creates a separate set of policy guidance that the board would be directing GR staff to pursue. So we didn't have to come with like an individual bill and say, this bill says we need to do X, Y, and Z. How do you feel? Can we propose it? But instead creates an opportunity for your government relations team to work with our departments to provide early and consistent direction to legislative efforts when it comes to these big hot topics. The other piece of it is these hot topics have a propensity to not be a single department's issue, and we need to approach things in a one Washington County manner, which means everyone needs to be on the same page, and that page needs to be directed by the policy setters for the county, which is this Board of County Commissioners. So to do that and let these directions move from session to session as opposed to a legislative agenda, which has broad principles and specific priorities that work for a year, a framework can help us move through the 2024 session and into the interim conversations that go into 2025, which a lot of these issues are going to have. You know, they're going to have conversations in 2024, but the housing conversation is a priority conversation, has been, I think, 5 years running now. I don't know, maybe more. So having these frameworks helps us work through those processes over time, but making sure that all of the departments that are impacted by those policy choices have an opportunity to understand the direction of the board and make sure we are working in that policy direction. So the policy questions around this is, do you want us to start creating frameworks for them to bring back? The other piece I'll say is that these don't have to have the agenda timelines that of December, so we have time for more robust conversation. However, the legislative conversation takes place whether or not we're ready. So as we sort of set up what the time frame looks like, there has to be conversation in November and December so that we can provide some direction to the board and have further conversations in future work sessions with the board about all of these issues. So I'm going to start on housing because apparently that's easier to solve.
Could I'd just like to make a comment here. I think that there's two issues for me in relationship to developing frameworks that go over a period of time. And number one is that's the efficient way to do business. And I support that. I also think that it has to be flexible. And if we saw anything in the tolling discussion, we saw our own positions kind of move a little bit too. And I believe over time and over changes, we need to be able to make sure that we've got the opportunity for some flexibility.
Yeah, and I think the intention with a policy framework is to be outcomes driven. What do we need to be successful across our lines of service for the county? And what does it mean to the board to be successful in meeting community need? And so when we talk about policy frameworks, it's not get this very particular language changed. And so we have some straw mans on the next slide that I'll get to, but I just wanted to tee up the housing discussion. And this, I will say, is just a representative of the issues that are under discussion right now. And don't reflect everything that all of our partners who touch on housing are already talking about. So there's land use and transportation conversations that are pretty robust. Permitting timelines, it's a direct reflection on the work that our staff will have to do, whether or not we are the final decision makers when it comes to lands under our jurisdiction, housing production strategies being added to our list, what it looks like to do an urban growth boundary expansion for purposes of housing. It's just little questions. Infrastructure that, you know, Tracy has talked about some, there's questions about system development charges, state funding, coordination between service providers, land use planners, and all the other jurisdictions that have to sit over things. And then, you know, in state governance, it's not just at the legislative level where we have to work on this sort of coordination. There are regulatory changes that we need, you know, some guiding principles around. So that way, when someone comes in with a new concept for creating a new funding stream for housing, we can say, you need to work through our systems because our systems exist and they're great. Things like that. Creating an increased understanding of local programs, technical assistance that is, you know, is money, but it's also resources, model codes, things like that. So in working through who would be part of that conversation to kind of set us up for a good conversation around a framework, looking to housing department as a developer, but also as an agency that services the homelessness community and provides other services to keep people in housing of all types, not just what they build, but across the county. The land use and transportation department, quite obviously, they are the land use authority within the urban and rural unincorporated areas of the county and get impacted by every decision they make, thinking, oh, this only impacts cities. And then they're like, 3 years later, we'll also impact urban unincorporated Washington County. It's fun. And then community development is also a partner in that conversation because they do provide programming related to, you know, keeping people in housing and supportive services. So we need to have that team kind of come together, look at this, and then look at some of the other things that are occurring. There is efforts by the governor to put forward one bill in 2024, which we will be having conversations around, that deals with land use authorities, but also infrastructure funding. There's always a question of how is the money coming out of OHCS and being put into play that over the, so in the 2024-20, the most recent, the 2023 biennium, $1 billion in investment in housing and making sure that that is coming to really successful programs like ours and making sure that our, you know, as our team is developing things like shelters, that they have what they need. Those are still conversations that will take place in 2024. So this is not a comprehensive list, but it is the type of work that we need to have reflected in creating a framework. So one thing that I think is pretty clear is that this board's direction is we need to house people and we need to have enough housing for people in Washington County. So presuming that outcome as a part, the foundational statement around housing for this board, these are potential. Just if I were to draft off the top of my head, statements that are outcome driven and that are about supporting the work that we do. So this is the type of language we would use in a framework so that it has that flexibility and the ability to move over multiple types of bills, multiple types of budget, but supports the work that our staff is doing and creates resources for them to do anything extra. So this is just a straw man, which is, I forgot what we do now. This is throwing pudding at the wall. And
Gender neutral straw person.
So these are there to kind of spark ideas, think about what level of policy we're talking at. We're not talking the individual details of a grant program. We're talking about these high level things and making sure that these are the types of things you would want to see in a framework if you were to see a framework adopted, and then allow staff to come back after further discussions about what you would like to see in a housing framework to move forward to create this first policy framework document for your consideration. So with that description of the world and what we would hope to get out of a policy framework from the board, what are your thoughts about, I mean, Commissioner Treese, you've stated generalized principles, but in the world of housing, what are the things you would like us to concentrate on? What are the resources you want to call out in particular? And then we can work together as a staff and leadership to make sure that we're starting to address that and creating a framework and then move forward from there. So that's a big question for y'all.
A lot of information to process. I think I need to sit with this. But initial gut reaction kind of a question is,
Sorry, that's my phone.
it's fine.
Jessica's dealing with it.
I turned the ringer off. So
I'm used to background
Apologize.
noise. It doesn't face me, but just initial question that comes to mind, and I think I probably need to have individual briefings about this framework. Is this something that will be helpful to the GR team here to be able to process bills that are out there to funnel through this framework, and then what bills to present to the board to say, what's our position on this board? It meets your requirement, and like this formula. Where's your position? Neutral? No.
yeah, that's
Yes.
exactly what this is intended to do, is to allow us to do that type of analysis. Not just in a reactive manner though, either. This is about us being positioned to say, we need this change in authority. Let's go after it. As part of the broader conversation that's happening around. So it allows us to position ourselves earlier in conversations. But it's really about making sure that the GR team and the departments, as we do the analysis on specific legislation, we can turn to these frameworks and say this fits within the direction the board wants to take us. And then we inform the board through the bill tracker reports about bills that meet those framework expectations, and why, and setting us up for explaining those positions without having to bring every single bill that might touch on something. And then when bills are places where the board needs that political awareness, we get it from the GR team, and those places where we don't know because it isn't addressed by the framework, we come back to the board and have those specific conversations during the session. But it's allowing us to be more nimble.
Yeah, my experience, it's with the Health and Human Services Steering Committee. Those are the bills that, like you were tracking, and you would share with me your spreadsheet that was many, many pages. But one of the most thing that I found helpful was, where's the county in this? And I think it's something you decided, or you used your own formula to, with conversation with leadership, where the county should be in this particular bill and the impact. But I really appreciated the notes they had, the implications to the county, if it was budget related or if it was programmatic level and where we are. So I paid attention to those and I benefited, because literally there were times where I was at a committee and I regurgitated every word that was in that explanation, because it was very robust, but it was also very comprehensive in terms of where we're going. So I'm now that I still would like the briefing to further understand.
We can't
because I
just decide your policy for you.
Right,
We need to have
right,
those conversations with you.
Plus, I want to make sure that, in a way, the Commissioner Treese's question around made me think of like being flexible, because we don't want to box. I remember in 2021, Jagjit had the similar process, and I remember one of the bills that the county was neutral. I was in support of it. In fact, I testified and was in the media. So I want to create that flexibility for individuals, commissioners. But yeah, you all are thinking through and being transparent with your process. That's very helpful to us behind the scenes.
I just want to be clear that when I was talking about flexibility, it was about changing a direction within that framework for the commission. So I just want to be clear about that. Did you want us to react to these points?
If there's anything in there that you feel you need to react to, yes, please, because I want to, like, these are just potentials, but if there's things that are missing too, please react to that. If there are things you definitely want to see on the table.
And I'm not sure if this fits under housing, but, and I'd ask Commissioner Willie to respond to this. Is there a place where we talk about making sure that the state doesn't get involved in land use decisions. And what comes to mind is the grand bargain.
Oh, boy.
And is there,
Slide away from the table.
Yeah.
I know.
Right. well,
But the reality is that I think, if we could turn back time, we might have different views uh, around the grand bargain and some of the things that happened there. And I recognize that that isn't necessarily tied directly to housing, but it's tied to land use. And I think that as part of our framework, it goes to that local control question about, that decision made at the state level. Maybe that wasn't the best place for it to be made.
So I'm not going to comment on the grand bargain, but I do think that there is room in a framework that is dealing with the land use components, not just like the funding streams of the housing, where we can state basic policy principles like local authority to do land use should be kept at the local level. If that is the direction that this board wants us to take that policy, there will, so in looking at those issues that are being talked about, that local authority is up for conversation. And so having guiding direction from the board as to how to approach those conversations. One example from the 2023 session is around the ability to say yes or no to variances that have been requested in the land use world. That is very traditionally, if we have clear and objective standards and your proposal does not meet them, you ask for a variance. We do the things that our staff are trained professional people who know what those expectations are and grant or deny a variance based on these criteria. House Bill 3414, as originally proposed, said, no, you don't get to make control. You have to grant the variance. Well, that's local authority that's being shortened. So this would be part of the overall framework of the outcomes that you would want to see. So for example, in this instance, the outcome you would want to see is that local decision-making must be preserved to answer local questions around land use and building development.
So I didn't see that.
Yeah,
in this.
So I ran out of room. No,
Well,
but that's
okay, so
important.
we're on the same.
So that's the type of direction that'll be helpful. I've noted that here. We can start working with our team between those departments to craft that. So that's exactly the type of feedback I'm hoping for.
And could I ask a question, please, about the third bullet? Coordination between local governments to efficiently and effectively create opportunity for increased housing development at low and middle income affordable levels. I don't understand what the state has to do with our coordination at the local level.
Sometimes they get in the way.
Okay.
And so the other piece, this is obviously just a straw man. This is not necessarily a recommendation.
I just want the explanation.
And so here, there are ways in which the state could accidentally or intentionally get into the process. So as we're talking in the housing world, there is an ongoing conversation about housing production strategies and housing capacity in the urban unincorporated areas. What could potentially happen if this is not part of our framework is that we traditionally have coordinated with our city partners. We put in intergovernmental agreements about, in this area that's unincorporated, we're going to have City Y do the work. And they're saying, yeah, we want to do the work. We don't want the county to make our plans for us. So if that urban unincorporated area work says, no, you can't have those intergovernmental agreements anymore, that's a disruption to the coordination. So we just want to make sure that principles are there in place to say, we support being the most effective by being the local decision makers about how jurisdictional things occur. So that's what's there. If it's not well written, we fix it.
Well, I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah.
So before, when you were that bullet point, when you were reading off, sorry, the chair is not here to tell me to get close, so I'm gonna be a grown up and get close to the mic. When you were earlier, when you were presenting the slide, one of the things that came to my mind, I know it's not in here, but that I teased out for myself was home ownership process programs. It's always been at the downstream level, and I think it's perhaps an opportunity to push the state to do home ownership assistance at the upstream level. and sort of loop in developers. Where do they sit in? How can they facilitate home ownerships? Which then goes back to building affordable homes that are truly affordable because, I live not far from South Hillsborough, beautiful homes that are being built, yet they're priced very expensive, over 400 and in that range. So in my head, I was thinking when you said affordable levels, how do we make sure, I was just thinking, oh, this is an opportunity to facilitate, to push the state and everyone to think about affordable homes, to be home ownership from the upstream level. And then also, one of the other thing is that, I don't know, to consider, about this bullet point that in my head, I'm just sharing my thoughts, which is why I was like a lot to process. I don't mean to be processing publicly, but since we are, homes aren't built for, I see a lot of homes that are being built, but they're like 2 and 3 stories levels. So they're not built for geriatric, like for the growing populations. So in my head, I was thinking, oh, this creates an opportunity to get ahead of that problem and say, the population is eventually going to age. This 3 stories make sense. That's seemed to be the trend here now. So a lot of opportunity to facilitate some upstream level improvement with that bullet point. But those are some of the.
That's great. And so in respect for the fact that
Yeah, I
it's
was
already
gonna
4
say.
o'clock,
we can-
and there's a lot to be unpacking here. I'm gonna maybe ask it. So what is clear is that we need to have further one-on-one conversations with commissioners and then come back and present in another work session, which is realistically in the Measure 110 conversation, which I'm going to go through really quickly. The reason why we've changed plans is making sure that every department has a better time frame in which to present the issues, concerns, but these current policy considerations come out of intensive meetings that Soccer's been paying attention to. The state created a joint committee to address Measure 110. They met for 4 hours and covered half the potential issues, none of which were related.
One issue.
Yeah, one issue in 4 hours. So it's going to be
Awesome.
fun and exciting conversation. They're talking about community safety next. So we want to be prepared to have the right information and bring it back at a future meeting. Because there are implications to the county, and that's what we want to focus on in that conversation is what are the impacts to the county based on policy changes and what are the outcomes we want to see or your board wants to see as part of that conversation. So we're ignoring this slide completely. I need to give Tracy like a couple minutes to talk through the federal agenda for the county's from the county's perspective. We don't see a need to change the federal agenda in 2024 since they haven't decided to do anything in 2023.
Is there time to decide to do, or is it? Oh, okay.
They have to do something in order to pass the budget and keep the.
Oh, that's right.
alive. Yeah.
We're gonna shut down other. All right, Stacy.
Yeah, November's coming.
Crazy.
So yes,
Crazy.
I do have a cousin named Stacy. So
Yeah.
and one named Lacey. It's yeah.
Oh
So
my God.
fun fact,
like a
Mark
country-
didn't know yet.
Sounds like a country western song. to me.
I'll be no wrong if I copy any of those.
No, rolls right off.
I did
so.
one. So we'll work on the lazy part. It will be hard to get you, Tracy, to.
No, I appreciate that. So we do have one additional item that our staff recommended be added to our federal agenda. We have a somewhat similar item, but a bit more specific related to this on our state legislative agenda. Our staff felt that this was important in the context of recent conversations, including with the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. As you know, our staff works really diligently to reduce potential sources of contamination that might enter into our system. When it comes to certain emerging contaminants, including PFAS, those source reduction efforts are really important, especially when there might not be cost-effective or reliable technologies available to treat or remove certain emerging contaminants. So this proposed priority is intended to reflect our efforts to engage in source control, including pre-treatment programs, and to continue to advance research to support sound rulemaking that protects public health and the environment. And then to reflect that we are a passive receiver not a producer of potential contaminants that we receive. So really, there's a lot of conversations at the federal level around emerging contaminants and kind of how aggressively and who should be taking those efforts on. We do take those efforts on. There are limitations to what can be done, and especially thinking about what is, again, technologically feasible, which is really important for our ratepayers, and what is cost effective as well. So a broader item to capture those recent conversations. So unless there's feedback on that item.
Well, I guess to me, you correctly stated that it's not like you're producing these things, you're the recipient of these things. And I don't understand how we're going to get ahead of that because they keep manufacturing these items that produce this. But at the same time, it scares me to say DEQ, go fix this, because then it just gets worse. They crank down the limitations, and certainly that makes your job harder. So I don't know where we go with that, but I certainly support what you're trying to do here. So, and I know that you're being handed a very difficult task.
And I appreciate that. And again, I think the emphasis too that source reduction can be a really, really important strategy and very cost effective as well.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that what you're saying is, when I think back about some of the entry points for PFAS in our system, it was the waste collection area, wasn't it? That was
certainly high tech industry and more, but the hotter spot was really landfill.
Uh-huh.
And landfill, very similar to us, is a passive. I mean, they're manufacturing these things there, right?
Right.
Result of what's being deposited at that location, and
But it's also a result of being posited at the location that's close to the water source. Is that right?
well, no, it's. I mean, the leachate from the landfill is plumbed to clean water services.
Okay.
So this is testing that we're doing within our influent, within our pipes.
Okay.
So really to try to look at where the sources of these pieces out there. And then as Tracy said, we've had some pretty good success when we identify it with product substitution, with source control, pieces like that. It's been without the benefit of actual regulation at this point, but we know they're on the horizon.
They're coming. Yes.
They're coming. One thing we've learned is the goalposts never get further away. They always get further away. They never get closer. So.
Thank you.
So it looks like we've got thumbs up to add that into the federal
yeah.
agenda for
Yeah.
this group. Okay, so what's next? And really quickly, I will say this also needs modification. This slide needed modification, but timing's everything. So today we are going to take some of this direction and we're going to do a few things. We'll start working on the draft agenda with the priorities and have conversations with Chair Harrington and Commissioner Rogers to make sure that, there's understanding so that when we come back in December with those agendas for your final review at a work session, we can move forward with the agenda itself. We will also start working the policy frameworks through a number of steps. One is having individual conversations with board members, but it's also working with coordinated leadership and departments, having conversations about what their needs are so we can properly identify those for you. And we'll be coming back in a future meeting, as yet to be determined within the schedule, to have that work session conversation around Measure 110, further conversation potentially around housing at that December work session. There's also going to be an additional conversation around comprehensive transportation system financing and funding in preparation for conversations anticipated for 2025, because we're going to have to start negotiating that like 3 months ago. So that is scheduled for early November already. You'll see those materials come through your work session packet. So that's what we mean by draft policy frameworks, is starting to go through the process of getting prepared to meet board's direction, but also give you the information you need to give us direction. So in December, the work session is the final review of the agenda. Then there is a board meeting the week following. That's your last board meeting to actually adopt through actual action at that December 12th board meeting, the 2024 legislative agendas and the policy frameworks, if they're prepared. But we can continue to have those conversations moving forward. It does not have to, it's not the same time frame. And then obviously in 2024, the state legislative session starts in February, or knows when the federal one will start working. We'll see. Just a quick reminder, those green days at the end are the legislative session. Constitutionally, that is how long it can be. See if they get through it. Thank you for your time and attention at the end of the day on a Tuesday. Sorry,
You
we
went
took
over time,
extra.
but that's okay. I won't penalize you.
Should.
Interestingly, you referred to coming attractions in November, realizing that is 7 days away and we are in November.
I pretend to not know the date on a regular basis.
I know it
Um,
got here really, really fast.
Yeah, but we have a whole week before it actually starts and we're back in front of you
And you
because
have a whole
Halloween.
team.
Yeah, we have a team.
That's right.
So I'm
Absolutely.
sorry, Pablo, did you want to talk?
Oh, no, I don't have a lot to add.
I'm making him get ready to start taking a lot of things off my plate and sticking it on his, so he's getting up to speed. I'll let him talk next.
But I'm excited.
And Pueblo, Aaron still, she gets paid by the word. So,
Pablo.
work on that.
And
So,
I haven't had the chance to welcome you
Oh, thank
publicly,
you.
so it's very nice to see you here
right.
and
you're here, I think.
really, really glad that you're part of the team.
Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be part of the team.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
and if you don't have anything else,
Did you want to talk about the consent agenda or are you okay?
I'm okay.
I'm okay either.
And Stephen, I will accept your offer. Okay. All right. Nothing else? We're adjourned.
Thank you.